Hi, I'm Alan W. Moore, and I'm presenting two books from 2015, Occupation Culture and Making Room, Cultural Production in Occupied Spaces. I call these precarious autonomous outposts, not TAZ, Temporary Autonomous Zone, which is an influential poetic concept. Squatting is temporary use. Conceived and executed politically, the action brings people together in common purpose. It's hard work on a lot of levels. The rewards are to live for a time in an alternative universe. Political squatting has a long history and well-developed tactics. These tactics and strategies have mainly been developed in Europe. Historically, North Americans have been more about squatting for living. We live in a squatter nation, as Hannah Dobbs tells in her great history, 9/10 of the Law. European squatters also squat to live, and squat for others, like migrants, to live. But they also squat specifically to make room for political organizing and DIY cultural projects. I come from the New York art world, the ragged edge of it. I took part in two surprisingly successful DIY protopunk projects, the artist group called Collab and the East Village Eye magazine. Me and my artist comrades occupied a city-owned building in 1980, an action which led to the formation of ABC No Rio, a community cultural center, and now a ghostly place that still lingers with structure and money to build and will eventually rise again. I followed the Lower East Side squatters movement, which was full of artists. Their story is wonderfully told in Amy Starachewski's book of oral histories, Ours to Lose. Important squatters like Frank Morales, Bill DePaolo, Stephen Englander, and Seth Dobachman are still around from that time in New York and are still very active. I'm going to talk about the two books we made in 2015 that deal with mostly European squatting, Making Room, Cultural Production in Occupied Spaces, and Occupation Culture, Art and Squatting in the City from Below. When I say we, I mean SQUAKE, S-Q-E-K, the Squatting Europe Collective. This was a group, or is a group, of researchers of squatting and activist squatters who got together 10 years ago to study the practice. It's a network that still exists. During its first golden years, I was privileged to tag along as SQUAKE met squatters in major European cities, heard and discussed research reports, visited major occupation projects, and learned what made them work and how they failed. Occupation Culture is my story of those meetings, city by city. It's heavily footnoted and comes out of both a blog and a zine project. The blog is Occupations and Properties, and the zine is House Magic. All of these projects were made possible by SQUAKE. Mine are not the only books that have come out of SQUAKE. The group members have produced several anthologies of mostly academic papers. Some of them are available as PDFs, open source online. They've also built online maps of live and historical squatted spaces in numerous European cities. I live in Madrid and Milwaukee. So, while my book, Occupation Culture, is about being a camp follower and note-taker of the SQUAKE group of activist researchers, the anthology I made with Alan Smart, called Making Room, is a much better seller. I think Making Room may be sold out, but both books are available as free downloads, PDFs, at occupationculture.net. That's occupationculture.net. The book has theoretical texts by Stephen Chukaitis in the wonderfully named Universidad Nomada. Then there's stories from the very successful squatting movements in the Netherlands. Participants write about Christiania in Denmark, the most famous squatted village in Europe. Although there is another the book also talks about, and the lesser known but super crusty fight for the youth house at Jagtvej 69. Ex-Chris of the great 56A Info Shop writes about London, where the fight for the elephant is still raging. Yes, they're losing, but losing loud. Then there's quite a lot about Berlin, Hamburg too, and the less-known camping occupations at the Documenta exhibitions in Kassel. There were 3 of those. We've got a bunch about Italy, the proving ground of the squatting modality called the social center. The Centro Sociale Occupato Autogestito from Rome, Milan, and Bologna. Venice happened later. And a number of texts about the very strange government-managed squatting collectives of Paris. Spain is not neglected in this book. Not only Barcelona, where anarchist traditions are deeply rooted, but also Madrid, where I live, where highly active, evolved squats continue to exist. And there's more, like the great Metelkova in Slovenia and the Universal Embassy in Brussels. And, and a final section on music, the media, and how squats historically incubated first pirate radio and then the first European hack labs. This is all secret history, which I love, but it's also a living tradition. You can tune in to squat.net website for the latest news on active projects around the world and in many languages. I'd love to talk about it. I don't know if there's that chance at this NYABF, Anarchist Book Fair, but I have other projects coming along next year, as do many of the members of Squake, which we look forward to presenting here in the future, maybe even in person. Thanks for your attention, and have a great fair.